You have one new message. Translating. Disney and Pixar's Hoppers is now available on Disney+.
You could say that again.
Critics are calling it Pixar's funniest movie ever and a wildly entertaining ride. Blizzard Potato. It's certified fresh and verified hot.
Now we party.
This is incredible!
Wow, I am clearing the rest of the day.
Disney and Pixar's Hoppers, now available on Disney+. Rated PG.
You survived the Miami weekend, nailed the speech, and maxed out your credit card in the name of friendship. Now you've got one hangover, 4 pastel dresses, and 0 reasons to wear them again. Sell them on Depop. Just snap a few photos, and we'll take care of the rest. And you at least get some of your dignity, money back. Someone on Depop wants what you've got. Start selling now. Depop, where taste recognizes taste.
Welcome to The Hypnotist, the show that gives you inside access to cutting-edge hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. Brought to you by the hypnotherapist demanded by celebrities, CEOs, and even royalty, Adam Cox. These recordings took place live from Adam's clinic in London's world-famous Harley Street. So, get yourself comfortable and enjoy today's episode of The Hypnotist.
Hi, it's Adam here. Now, this is not a typical hypnosis session. In fact, you're going to listen to a podcast where I was a guest on, and the host, Robyn Holme, is the host asking me questions, and her podcast is called The Hypnotic Empath. Robyn is a hypnotist, and she specializes in the mind-body connection. So you're going to hear how she asks me about how I got into hypnosis and what the key things are that I do differently. So if you're interested in learning more about me and behind the scenes stuff about how and why I do hypnosis, this might be quite a useful session to listen into. Robyn is an excellent hypnotist, and she asked me very good questions, all relating to hypnosis. So find a nice comfortable place and check that out. And I'm going to have a link to her podcast in the show notes. So if you want to hear more of her interviews, definitely check that out. All right, take care.
Hello and welcome to the Hypnotic Empath. I am your host, Robyn Holme, and I am so excited to be here with Adam Cox. I met Adam a year ago almost at the HypnoThoughts conference down in Vegas, and he taught a little workshop on podcasting for hypnotherapists. So I have to thank Adam for this podcast that I've now been running for almost a year now. We're at 42 episodes. And Adam was so generous, not only with everything that he taught us in the workshop itself, but then afterwards, he even helped me to pick the name of this podcast. So Adam, I am so grateful to you. Podcasting is something that I've wanted to do since 2009, and taking your workshop was the last little push that I needed to be able to do that. And then in addition to that, I took another workshop of his on nested loops. And if you have done any of my membership classes, I use nested loops a lot in my guided journeys when we're working with weight loss. And that is also thanks to Adam. So I cannot wait to pick your brain. Adam, welcome here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Really happy to have you. So I'm wondering, just for the listeners, if you could explain a little bit about yourself, just introduce yourself a little bit and tell them anything that you would like them to know.
Yeah. So one of the clues is my accent. So I'm UK based. I live in London. I'm known as a hypnotherapist. And I would say of the thing that most people in the hypnosis industry know me as is as being a podcast host of a podcast called The Hypnotist. And The Hypnotist is a podcast, excuse the thunder here that's coming through. The Hypnotist for me is a podcast that I created right at the beginning of COVID. I was in quite a prestigious location in central London. There's a street called Harley Street, and Harley Street where the rich and famous get their medical treatment and their cosmetic surgery and their high-level therapy. And so I had a clinic on the penthouse suite of this very impressive building in Harley Street. The pandemic came along, And I kind of knew that it would be for a period of time. I didn't know if it was going to be months or years, difficult to see clients face to face. And my passion is hypnosis. And I thought that I needed an outlet for hypnosis at a time when I would be seeing less clients. And I didn't have my Recordio studio built then. I wasn't working with any clients remotely at that particular point. So I thought, right, I need to have an outlet for hypnosis. And my inspiration for the Hypnotist podcast was a book. And it was a book that inspired me when I was getting into hypnosis, when I was doing a psychology degree, and it was called Magic in Action by Richard Bandler. And what I liked about it is that most books on hypnosis and NLP they're theoretical. They teach you certain techniques and models. What I liked about Magic in Action is that it was a book of transcripts, primarily of Richard Bandler interacting with clients. And you hear the back and forth of shifting submodalities and doing elicitation questions. And I learned a lot more from kind of the movie I made in my head of that interaction back and forth of that. So when it came to creating a hypnosis podcast, I kind of looked at what was already out there. And there are some excellent training hypnosis podcasts. My favorite, and I learned a lot from Mike Mandel and Chris Thompson, called Brain Software, is brilliant. So if you want to learn more about hypnosis, that is a highly recommended podcast. So I got a lot of value from that. But that's teaching people about techniques and those kind of things. And if you go on YouTube, there is no shortage of hypnosis scripts that are quite generic. Hypnosis to sleep, hypnosis to lose weight. And clearly they weren't for someone. They're just written for people, like the general kind of thing. And as you can probably tell from my studio here, I'm a complete audio geek. So one of the things that I was doing in Harley Street is I would record every session. I had a portable microphone. I would do the hypnosis with the client. I would record my voice because then it was a bonus to the client to have a good quality sound recording, not of a hypnosis session, but of their hypnosis session. And when the pandemic came, it dawned on me that I had about 200 recordings of just my voice of doing hypnosis. And I'm like, could I repurpose that audio that I've already recorded in very good quality and turn it into something? And what would I need to do that? And I thought all I would really need is 5 minutes beforehand to explain the issue that the client had and then what techniques I was using. And then you could actually hear the actual hypnosis session that a real client had paid for. And I did that. And then it dawned on me that the vast majority of recordings that I had of those 200 were very similar because mainly I was working with weight loss clients at the time. But it got the ball rolling and I was doing one episode a week. And that one episode a week started to build a bit of traction. But it dawned on me that I needed to be more creative. And a real catalyst for me was a really niche sci-fi TV series on Amazon Prime. And it was called Tales from the Loop. And it was this retro sci-fi set in the future, but with kind of like 60s kind of architecture and kind of cars. But some of the storylines in that, for example, there's one storyline where they've got this device that freezes time for everyone else but you. And then it was kind of like, that's cool. And then they had this thing where you could, like, there's lots of movies where you do like a body swap, like Freaky Friday. And they had one storyline where you swap perceptions with someone else. And I'm like, oh, okay, time distortion, perceptual shifts. There's one storyline where he was blowing the candles out on a birthday cake and then went forward in time to see his life at the end of his life. And that's almost like the Dickens pattern, and then kind of figuring out, oh, what do I need to do now? So they're very cool storylines, very niche TV show. So I did a few podcast episodes inspired by those storylines, and nobody cared at all. I found it really cool and interesting. Nobody else cared. And then I watched a movie that was more popular called Limitless with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's about this idea of that there's a nootropic drug called NZT, and if you take it, you activate the power of the mind. And I think a lot of people secretly like the idea of hypnosis because they like the idea of tapping into more of their potential, more of their resources. So I created a hypnosis session based on the concept of limitless. And I shared it on social media and I said, hey, I've created, and this is lockdown, everyone's bored, they've got nothing to do. So I put this social media post and I say, I've just created a hypnosis session inspired by the movie Limitless. If you want it, let me know. And what I didn't do is just send them the recording. I sent them to the link of the episode. I didn't have it on Spotify then, it was on Apple. And what I didn't realize at the time that I was doing is I was training the algorithm so that people would then click the link, and then the algorithm knew what kind of people were clicking the link, and then it put my content in front of more people that were like the people that clicked the link. I had no idea I was doing this. It was just, hey, I'm going to share this thing, but I'm going to share my podcast episode rather than the audio file. And then suddenly the audience went up and I'm like, ooh, feedback. And then I did more. So what most people know me now as being is a hypnotherapist / podcaster about hypnosis, where I share real hypnosis based on the client sessions with real clients facing real issues. But crucially, I protect the confidentiality of the clients that I work with. You never know who I'm working with unless I do a free session and they volunteer to kind of, share their story. Outside of that, nobody would know that I'm who I'm working with. But you hear the actual session, not a recording of what it would have been like, but the actual session. And it's become this strange flywheel for me, because at the time, I wasn't a very busy hypnotherapist, but I shared my hypnosis, and that shared hypnosis raised my profile, and that led me to getting more clients. And each client session I did, I recorded it, and then I shared that, and then I got bigger audience, and it kind of grew and grew. And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I hit 20 million downloads and streams, which was kind of mind-boggling. And it all came from this kind of idea of, I want to find a creative outlet for hypnosis during the pandemic. And I think a lot of people took up hobbies in that. And this keeps on going because it's self-perpetuating. I get the fulfillment, I get the creative stimulation, but I also generate new clients from the back of it. So there's no reason to stop. If that it kind of gives you a bit of an introduction.
This episode is brought to you by Google Health. Stop chasing someone else's definition of health. What matters is what's healthy for you. Google Health offers a new kind of coach built with Gemini for effortless tracking, sleep insights, and holistic coaching tailored to you. Visit googlestore.com to learn more and start a new relationship with your health. Requires Google account, Google Health app, internet, and Google Health Premium subscription. Features subject to change. Availability and results vary. Not intended for medical purposes. Works independently of Gemini apps. Check responses for accuracy.
Good sleep is everything. That's why Ollie's Science Back Support is made with a blend of melatonin and L-theanine for both kiddos and grown-ups. So when your mind won't switch off, you've got something that can help. Your racing thoughts and restless nights won't stand a chance. Find Ollie Sleep Solutions for the whole family at ollie.com. That's OLLY.com.
I love it. And I do something really similar with the podcast. I interview a guest one week, and then the second week I do a hypnosis session. But like you had said, I'm just doing a general hypnosis session that could apply to anybody who has anxiety or this or that, the other thing. And the what I did a couple of times, though, that was so much fun, is I had volunteers and I did a live regression session. I've done that twice.
Nice.
And again, protecting confidentiality, but they volunteered, and I take out the names and all that, and I block out the picture, because it was the same thing where I'm like, direct suggestion, which is, it sounds like that's what you're mostly doing. Do you do any regression in your work?
Depends on the client. So where I find regression really useful is if there is an addiction and it started at a particular time for a particular reason. So there's almost regression to cause. If there is some kind of PTSD or trauma response, regression to cause, but disassociated regression is quite helpful. So I had a client this morning who, she was called a monster by a mother that had postnatal depression and a form of psychosis, and that's a lot for a 4-year-old to kind of hear that, you know, you're inhuman. So we use regression there. A lot of the time, my favorite tools really is metaphor, parts therapy, I use regression and I use future pacing in almost every session to kind of take them to the future that they want. And of course, nested loops, so levels of disassociation, which for me, mainly because I find it creatively stimulating and a richer experience for the client.
I practice exactly the same way. Everything that you said, that's exactly what I do as well. And it's so effective and it's so much fun to have all of the different tools. But I loved being able to share a regression to cause session on the podcast itself, because that was a really neat thing to say. And I also always future pace people. And future pacing, for those of you that don't know, is where we take you into the future that you want, as if it were so. And then what happens in the subconscious mind is that the subconscious then forms a memory, but in the future. It's now a memory that you formed in the future. And as it's stored as a memory, then the subconscious will be like, oh, that's familiar. Oh, that's safe. And then it allows you to absorb that future. And it's a really great tool. When I got into hypnosis myself, it was because I was trying to conceive. And my hypnotherapist, do you know Lindsay Eastburn? She was at Hypno Thoughts Live. You may have never crossed paths with her.
I don't know if I've crossed paths, no.
She's down in Denver. She's phenomenal. So she's who I started hypnosis with, oh gosh, it'd be at least 10 years ago now. And she would always future pace me, because at that point I had been on my fertility journey for 11 years. 11 years, tons of failed IVF, and I couldn't imagine myself ever receiving a positive pregnancy test, ever seeing a positive ultrasound, ever holding a baby in my arms. So she introduced me to future pacing, and she did it every single session so that I could start to feel that that was even possible for me. Yeah, it was incredible. Adam, how did you get into hypnosis yourself? What brought you into the hypnotherapy world?
Deep insecurities. So growing up as a child, I had this, I would say a conviction. It wasn't even a belief or a doubt, a deep conviction of not being enough. And it came with a positive silver lining, in the sense that I came to the conclusion, I think a belief is just a feeling of certainty of something. So I was certain that I wasn't enough, but I didn't want to remain that way. So what it did is it gave me a desire to improve myself. And I think that's at the core of personal development, really, is a desire of saying, okay, well, I don't have to accept this, I can improve it. And I was an avid reader. I would read what I consider meta beliefs or meta skills. So I would, and it sounds very geeky, but 11, 12 years old, I was reading books on mnemonics and speed reading, because I thought, okay, if I can remember more, I can retain more knowledge. That's a helpful skill. If I can speed read, I can cover more ground. And because I was able to read a lot, I was in the library a lot. And because I didn't feel very worthy, I would read lots of books about self-improvement. And the combination of reading lots of books on self-improvement and covering a lot of ground, and then retaining through mnemonics some of the useful things, meant that I kind of acquired lots of knowledge about different strategies and those things. And part of being an avid reader, I read a book about stage hypnosis by Ormond McGill when I was about 12 or 13. So I was doing little finger locking kind of convincer tests in the magnetic fingers and those kind of things. So it created an interest. And then when I was about 15 years old, there was a primetime TV show in the UK featuring a hypnotist called Paul McKenna. A lot of people know Paul McKenna for his personal development books. So I Can Make You Thin, I Can Make You Rich, I Can Change Your Life in 7 Days. But he was known in the UK at that time as a stage hypnotist. And I was curious about stage hypnosis because it seemed to have the answer that I was looking for of how do you change quickly? How do you tap into what your mind is capable of? So I was fascinated then, and I saw a few stage hypnosis shows, and that influenced me to do a psychology degree. But what happened in my first year at university is a intense level of social anxiety. So there I am, 18 years old, living alone for the first time. And it was a series of unfortunate events. I chipped my tooth. I had like a skin condition on my face. I had a fear of judgment from other people, so I avoided my people. And then it was this kind of like ripple effect where effectively I hid away from the world, and I would only leave my apartment to get essential groceries, and also crucially to go to the 24-hour library because there was no people at night to kind of learn. And while I was in that dark place of genuinely feeling suicidal and kind of hopeless, that's when I really delved into this world of NLP and hypnosis and psychology. As a guinea pig, I wanted to fix myself. And lots of things didn't work. You know, if you look at the non-interventional side of the therapeutic spectrum, like counseling and psychoanalysis, they don't even expect change. Like, the intention is that you speak to your therapist for 10 years and it's just what I use the phrase expensive conversations. And I didn't have the time or the inclination to kind of go through that pathway. And I didn't want to be medicated or self-medicated, because I knew that if I saw a doctor and they'd say, right, generalized anxiety disorder, have these SRIs and these beta blockers, or take these antidepressants, didn't want that. So I wanted to change myself, really, and not feel the way I was feeling, which was kind of suicidal and kind of hopeless. And it kind of worked on me, and I could change certain belief systems, and things went from hopeless to hopeful. And then I was able to activate more resourceful states in myself. And that, and I framed it I know it now as timeline therapy, but at the time I didn't realize. I just considered two futures. In this dark place of high social anxiety, I considered a future of, what does life look like if I keep this level of anxiety forever? Well, if you've got severe social anxiety around people, your options are kind of limited because there's not a lot that you can do. So that seemed pretty bleak to me. And then I thought, what would happen if I could get over this somehow? Didn't necessarily know how, but what would that look like? And I gave myself a post-hypnotic suggestion in that moment. I know it for that now. I didn't know it at the time. And that hypnotic suggestion was, if I can get over this, then surely I can get over anything. If I can go from this really bleak place to something more resourceful, then I can always get myself in a more resourceful state. And I kind of framed it as, what if this isn't a horrible situation, but an opportunity to, not if I can fix myself, but when I fix myself, use that as a foundation for constant improvement and kind of progression and growth. And that kind of excited me. So I had one future which is kind of hopeless and bleak, and another future which seemed really exciting. And the crucial thing is that in that future, I had to try stuff and test stuff out, because otherwise, how would I know if it kind of worked? And it gave me that experimental approach. So the irony was that I was doing a psychology degree at the time, and I was depressed and anxious and suicidal, but it got me to a place where I started exercising more. I started learning even more. I started testing. I was effectively my first client. And then within a couple of years, I had moved from, and there was one particular book, again, it was Richard Bandler, but he wrote a book with John Laval called Persuasion Engineering, which was using NLP and his slight evolution of that he called design human engineering, specifically for, he was trying to sell to the sales training market. So it was effectively sales. And then an idea popped into my head, a suggestion, which is, I'm really passionate about hypnosis and NLP. What if I get a job in sales and then I get to spend all day learning language patterns and influence patterns and all of this stuff? So I did. I got a job in a local radio station, and I did a 13-week course in my 1 week's worth of work experience, and they hired me. And then I got another job in a PR agency, and then I set up on my own business, almost like a Jerry Maguire moment of creating my own agency when I was 23 years old. And that then led to, because when I've developed certain resource states and empowering belief systems, my intention was not to help other people at all. It was to do what any deeply insecure man in their 20s would do if they finally found confidence, and that was make money and kind of have good experiences. So that's what I did. And then I took that money and then I had various investments. And at the age of 35, I had this kind of feeling of frustration and a lack of fulfillment. And I learned about Ikigai, and I could instantly tell, because I quite like Venn diagrams anyway, I could instantly tell that I had 3 of the circles in my PR agency company. The world needed it, I was good at it, and I was being paid for it, but I was not passionate about it at all. And again, I asked myself the question, what is it that I'm passionate about, even if I'm not getting paid for it? It was hypnosis, it was psychology, it was those things. So literally the next day, I signed up for a postgraduate qualification in clinical hypnotherapy. And then I found like a real enthusiasm for that. And the more I spent time doing hypnosis or learning about hypnosis, the better my life got. And that was, I turned 48 a few days ago. So that was 13 years ago. So I've been actively doing clinical hypnotherapy with clients for about 11, 12 years, and then kind of learning it for about a year. And it's been great for me. Like there is no downside to it. I used to call it my lucrative hobby because I would have done it for free, but people were paying me to do it. And it's kind of like, well, there's lots of people that spend a fortune on their hobbies, and I was getting paid for mine. And now it's at a point where my PR agency, I'm the chairman of that agency, but I don't run it anymore. It has a managing director that runs it. And I get to spend lots of my time in the world of hypnosis, which means going to cool conferences and speaking and kind of training people, but also I publish an episode daily on my podcast. So, I'm able to impact the world and people that I'll never meet just by sharing my voice. And that's a very cool thing you can do now at this point in history. And you couldn't have done this 20 years ago. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. I know, I'm grateful for that all the time. So when you say that you train people, do you train people in basic hypnosis as well as your nested loops and all of that?
Yeah, no. So I look at what's out there and I think, would I have the inclination to teach people that don't know hypnosis about the basics of hypnosis? And it's kind of like, that's not really my thing, because I never really wanted to be kind of a teacher and that stuff. What I love doing though is teaching people that already know they want to be a hypnotherapist and already know those things, and then advanced level skills. So nobody would learn nested loops in year one of being a hypnotherapist. But if you've been doing hypnotherapy for a few years, that's quite a valuable skill to enhance the level of creativity and kind of depth of a hypnosis session. And if I can train someone that's got something important to share as to how to launch a podcast, that's pretty cool. And obviously I've done that. So I'm a big believer of congruency. It frustrates me when you've got people teaching about stuff that they're not actually doing that thing. So if I never did nested loops or levels of disassociation, I shouldn't be the one teaching it. And if I shouldn't be teaching other people about a podcast unless I've actually got a successful podcast. So those are the things that I tend to drift towards. It's kind of like, can I help other people through that little niche that I've figured out some things that might be useful for other people?
Mm-hmm. That's the best way to teach, and I have found it so useful. Would you be able to explain a little bit for the people listening what nested loops are? We keep referencing it, but it might be an interesting thing to go into the concept.
So a nested loop is a story within a story. And the example that will connect with most people is when you're speaking with someone and they're telling you about this holiday they've been on, and then suddenly they go off on a tangent. And now they're talking about this random thing that has nothing. And you haven't got to the end of the story about their holiday. But now they're on this tangent. And part of you still wants to know what happens on this story, particularly if they open a loop and they say, oh, you won't believe what happened on the holiday. It was one of the strangest experiences of my life. But I tell you what, that reminds me of, and you're like, what was the strange thing that happened on the holiday? So that tangent creates an open loop. They started on a new story and you haven't got to the end of the first story. That's a very basic nested loop where you've got one new story within a pre-existing story. It can get more complex because if that person that has the holiday and then they're talking about a story of meeting someone famous, and then before they get to the end of talking about that famous person, they then reflect on a memory they had when they were a child. Then you've got story one, open a loop, story two, open a loop, story three, open a loop. And you're like, right, what happened with the celebrity and what happened on the holiday? And now you're talking about this childhood memory, like where are we? And it's quite compelling and captivating if you speak with someone, and some people naturally do that. They start a line and they either never get back to it or they digress and they digress and they digress and go off on all these tangents. But there's something hypnotic about that, even though they're not trying to do hypnosis, because you're like, where am I? And am I ever going to find out what happens? And the experience that most people have with open loops is a feeling of unfinished business. So most people have had the experience of being told a bit of gossip and then someone backtracks before they get to the end. So they're like, oh, you won't believe what she did. Or forget I said anything. And you're like, who? What happened? There's an open loop. Or another good example of an open loop might be the beginning of a riddle and you never hear the answer, or a joke without the punchline, or a wrapped present and you never get to find out what's in it. So all of these are open loops. And what I found is that most hypnotherapists...
Do you hear that? Sounds like breakfast is ready. Because Quaker's coming in hot with morning nutrition. 100% whole grain oats and a good source of fiber to fuel the rhythm of your morning and kickstart your day. And that sounds absolutely delicious. Fuel to start whatever's next. Quaker, official sponsor of FIFA World Cup 26.
Let's go! Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Feel a little bit like Hansel and Gretel in the sense that they know there's this powerful thing called nested loops. But if they go off deliberately on story 1, open a loop, story 2, open a loop, story 3, open a loop, what if they can't find their way back home? And that's why most hypnotherapists don't do it. And I mentioned before that I created a hypnosis session based on Limitless. That, when I saw the audience rise, I'm like, oh, I could get more inspiration from movies. And one of my favorite movies is called Inception. And Inception, if you haven't seen, if anyone listening hasn't seen Inception, you've got this Leonardo DiCaprio character who itself has an open loop. He's trying to figure out how does he get to see his kids again, but also why does his wife kill himself? Like, you've got open loops there. You've got this whole heist thing that in order to see his children again, he has to put a seed of an idea into the mind of the heir of a billionaire conglomerate. So you've got that open loop. But they've got this machine that enables people to go into dreams. And what's fascinating about that is that there's a dream on an airplane, and then there's a dream within a white van being chased by people, and then in a hotel, and then in a snow fortress, and then in this world called limbo of crumbling buildings. And as I turned the storyline and the concept of that into a hypnosis session, I was like, this is nested loops. Story 1, open a loop, start story 2. And what made it easier to follow is the fact that they're in different physical locations. You know where you are in the story because a plane is different from a van is different from a hotel is different from a snow fortress, and a snow fortress is different from, a crumbling apocalyptic city. And I thought, ooh, I remember I learned about mnemonics when I was 12 years old. It's like, this is mnemonics. It's a storyline with different structures. So the way I do nested loops is slightly different from the linguistic version of story 1 digress, story 2 digress. I do it with levels of disassociation, and I use symbols, and the symbols, and you get lots of symbolism in dream analysis, but you also get lots of symbolism in hypnosis. I use the symbols as portals from one level of disassociation to another. And a classic deepener within classic hypnotherapy is you walk down a staircase, and as you walk down the staircase, you go deeper and deeper. Okay, fine. But why not have the staircase lead to an entirely different place? Why not have the staircase in your own home lead to a beach? And on that beach, there's a door on the beach, and that beach leads you to somewhere else. Well, now you've got absurdity, and absurdity is one of the most powerful mnemonics you can have because it doesn't quite make sense. If you saw a door frame on a beach, you would remember that forever. because there's not normally door frames on a beach not connected to a wall. You would remember that. So it uses absurdity, it uses levels of disassociation, and the mnemonics become the breadcrumbs that aren't going to be eaten by the animal forest so you can find your way back home. And that's how I teach and do nested loops. So it's levels of disassociation rather than linguistic loops. And it changes depending on the client, because if you have to remember stories within stories, that's a lot of cognitive work you have to do. If you create the stories, depending on the client in front of you, and you make the starting place a familiar place that they already know and they feel good, and then you take them to another place that is kind of interesting or different, then it's quite powerful. And what I like about this is that there's evidence that these levels of disassociation are powerful mnemonics in literature. So you're familiar with Alice in Wonderland. Okay. How did Alice get to Wonderland?
Didn't she go down a burrow?
Yeah, down a rabbit hole. Absolutely. Yeah. And have you seen Narnia, the Narnia Chronicles? Okay. Yeah. How did they get to Narnia?
Through the wardrobe.
Through the wardrobe. And it might be years since you've read or seen Alice in Wonderland, but yet the absurdity of getting from reality to a different place through a rabbit hole or a wardrobe still retains. And you didn't try and remember that. So if that can last decades, I'm pretty sure we can create mnemonics that last for a 45-minute hypnosis session. And I like to use evidence-based things. And when you let people know that, well, you remember the wardrobe from Narnia decades after first seeing it, then they're like, yeah. And so it's like, well, how likely are you to remember, a wardrobe within a hypnosis session for your client? And it gives them the confidence to make nested loops simple and effective and memorable, so they have no fear of getting lost, and they have this belief in their own capabilities and competency of being able to do it in a way that they haven't felt comfortable when they were taught it with the linguistic way of start story one, digress, create story two. I don't do hypnosis sessions like that, but I do with levels of disassociation. So, and what that does is it has a few benefits in the sense that each level of disassociation creates confusion, it creates open loops, it creates engagement. A lot of my clients are highly intelligent people. And if I just said, and you're feeling relaxed, progressive muscle relaxation, and follow the suggestions, I know they're in their head saying, is this hypnosis? Is this working? What am I going to do now? You take them on a journey where they're like, where am I? You've got them, and you can steer them anywhere at that particular point. So it's more creative, it's more intellectually stimulating, and it's more fun for me. I've done thousands of hypnosis sessions. If I just did the same script every time, I'm fucking bored. It has to be stimulating for me. Otherwise, that's going to feed across to the client. So that again makes it more interesting. And all of this kind of adds therapeutic weight, because if you do a good experience for the client and you take them to a certain place, then the suggestions are more likely to take root. And that was the premise of Inception, that if they had a conversation with this guy that's about to inherit the conglomerate in reality, oh, you should break up the companies, he's going to reject that. But a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream, and actually it's good for the environment, and he's bought into the environment, that seed can take root. It feels like it's their idea. And then that's why it resonated with me when I saw Inception. It's kind of like, okay, an idea that might be rejected at a surface level might actually be taken at a deep level. And that's kind of the premise of hypnosis, that we're somehow circumnavigating the critical faculty so that suggestions aren't rejected. Because most people, if they smoke, they know that if they keep smoking, it's bad for them. And yet they keep doing it. So logic is not going to work. We need to get to a different place. And therefore, that's kind of the whole point of hypnosis.
Wonderfully explained. I love how you just illustrated that. So how did you end up specializing in, you said it in the beginning when you were first doing hypnotherapy, that you were mostly working with weight loss. Do you still work with weight loss? I listen to your podcast all the time, so I know you have a ton of different things that you work with, and it's very good, Adam. I really, really love it.
So I started with weight loss because I wanted to see what the world wanted me to be. And when I became a hypnotherapist, I created 3 brands at exactly the same time. I created Hypno-Slimming for weight loss, and it has its own website. And I created Phobia Guru because I had deep anxieties and phobias, so I had an interest in that. And I created a brand called Addiction Experts. And what I found is that each of the brands had a different benefit. So I was able to get enough clients from buying Google AdWords for weight loss that I couldn't do for phobias and addictions, because a lot of the addictions are paid for either by pharmaceutical companies or rehabs. So the cost per click is quite high on that. For the specific phrase weight loss hypnosis, there was less competition, so I could make that work. So that's where the majority of my clients came from. From an SEO and YouTube perspective, on one weekend, I just decided to do a 5 to 10 minute video explaining what the phobia was and how it could be resolved for 100 different phobias. And I put them on, and I would get lots of clients from these like videos on YouTube, because people interested in a fear of public speaking don't care about a fear of insects. They're looking for that specific thing and they're highly motivated. So I was getting clients organically from YouTube, and also SEO benefits because I would replicate that on a page. And I was getting media interest in the addiction. So I get high profile TV appearances for obscure addictions. So gaming addiction, I was on the BBC, and I was in every national radio station and newspaper for binge watching, so Netflix shows and these obscure things, because they would put addiction expert into Google, and because I had the domain addictionexperts.co, I came up, we need to speak to this guy. So each of the different things led to different types of clients, but the majority in the early days of the kind of clients that I was working with was weight loss, because I was paying about $2,000 a month on Google AdWords, and therefore most of my clients happened to be in that way. What changed though is that when COVID came along, I stopped my Google AdWords overnight, launched a podcast, and after about a year or two, I was making more clients from my podcast than I was from Google. And the nature of the podcast is that it happens to cover lots of different things, because each time I do a particular client, someone else in the world puts that into Spotify or YouTube. It comes up and they see that I've done hypnosis on that, and they're like, oh, can you help me? So it started off very niche, and now it's become very broad, because I'm now known as the hypnotist on Spotify, whereas when I began, nobody knew who I was, so I had to own a niche, whereas now my niche is I'm the guy on Spotify that does hypnosis. So that it's changed because of that. But I still love working with weight loss clients. And what I learned very quickly is that it has nothing to do with knowledge of calories in, calories out, and everything to do with the unconscious desire to either numb pain or cope with something or find a distraction. And that's where my interest in parts therapy came, and regression, because initially my perception was, okay, say the words, you have no desire for, processed food. No, you've got to get to the root cause of why do they want that food. And sometimes it's they were a child, and whenever there was moments of happiness, there was a fizzy drink and some sweets and a packet of crisps and cookies in their hand. Like, that's why it was linked to, this is what love feels like. This is what connection feels like. This is what happiness feels like. Then they're older and they feel lonely. Of course they want to crave that thing. And it's just fascinating for me why we do what we do. And it quite often is paradoxical that it isn't the obvious thing. It's quite often the underlying need, and humans do the best they can with what they have. And if they feel disconnected, they want to medicate themselves and they want to feel connected. Food can do that. Alcohol can do that. If someone's very anxious, alcohol can help. Drugs can help. Escaping into doom scrolling can help. And all of these things. And you know this, of course, but there's a saying in therapy, the issue is never the issue. Not always true, but a lot of the time it is true, that actually the issue is the attempt at the coping strategy for the deeper underlying issue. And if you resolve the issue, then the surface level stuff resolve, because you've got to the thing that's causing it or the intention behind it.
That's what I always say. Your body is doing its best to keep you safe. And
Yeah.
there's also a level of gratitude, I think, that is important when we're working with addictions of any kind, to be like, thank you, body, for doing the best that you could to keep me safe. And now I'm going to give you another way. And I do a lot of work with weight loss too. I don't know if you know my history much, but I come from the fitness industry. So I was in the fitness industry for 10 years. So of course worked with weight loss that way. And then I got into something called body talk, which is more somatic. It has to do with the somatic memory and emotion that we store in our fascial system. And then I got into hypnotherapy. So now I do more what I would call somatic hypnotherapy. So it has a real mind-body connection. And when I work with weight loss, it's never about the food. It's never about the food. And then I have seen something really interesting, Adam, in the last 15 years especially, is that sometimes the weight is a geographical boundary of protection for people. It's a way that they're keeping. You've seen that too? It's a
particularly for women that have been sexually assaulted or got unwanted attention. And again, it's a form of self-hypnosis that at the time, all it takes is one evaluation in a heightened emotional state of, I was targeted because I'm slim, and then the unconscious like, oh, we can solve this. And then it becomes a barrier, or it becomes a deterrent, it becomes all of these things. And you're right, it's the body trying to keep them safe. And I've really seen that. And there was a gentleman I worked with who had a suspected heart attack. He was very overweight, needed walking sticks to move. And we did a few sessions. He started losing weight, and then he started sabotaging it. And we did regression to figure out why. And the underlying cause is that he was in 2 relationships that led to marriage, that led to huge emotional pain for him. In one case, he was sectioned in a psychiatric hospital for a couple of years. He never saw his son for about 18 years. And he had a belief, clearly wasn't true, that if he loses weight, he'll be in a relationship again, and then he'll be crushed. So although it's more prevalent in women, it can happen in men as well, where the body is, it's holding onto the weight to keep them safe.
Eczema is unpredictable, but you can flare less with Ebglyss, a once-monthly treatment for moderate to severe eczema. After an initial 4-month or longer dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Appearence achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can make me feel like a spectator in my own life.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine preventive treatment.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor, visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
And I think I see it especially because I work so much with empaths that are highly sensitive to their environment. They're so easily able to pick up on other people's feelings and emotions and judgments that when they don't have the energetic protection, their body creates the physical protection. Yeah. So a big part of my work is putting in that energetic protection first, and then we can regress if we need to. And it's been such a powerful thing. And don't you think that it really helps to take away the shame? Because it's like, this is not your fault. This is your body doing its best it can to protect you. Let's give it another way. And then you can start making different choices. Because we know that you have to make different choices in order to progress, but sometimes you can't. And I always say to people, if you're at the place where you know what you need to do, but you cannot make yourself do it, that's a subconscious block, baby. Mm-hmm. We can work through that with hypnosis, which is so empowering.
It's hugely empowering, and it's such an obvious distinction when you know, but it's so mysterious when you don't. And that is to separate the intention from the execution. So if someone wants to numb pain and they're using alcohol to do that, the intention is good, numbing pain, but the tool they're using to numb that pain actually comes at a huge cost and causes all these other things. So if we can make it so that either the pain isn't there or we find a better way to numb the pain and it doesn't need alcohol, now you've got choice. And when you've got choice, you can be discerning and you can make different things. But the neural pathway does what works. And in the absence of something better or viable, it's going to keep doing that thing. And unfortunately, a lot of unconscious behavior is destructive. So it's kind of like, that person that learned that, oh, it's pretty cool to smoke when they're 13 years old and they feel like somehow rebellious or defiant. It's not that rebellious to be 45 years old, shivering outside, of somewhere, like being absolutely dependent on something. But it came from that place of wanting to be more mature or, empowered in some way. It comes from a good place. But sometimes we don't update the belief systems linked to it. And what worked once doesn't necessarily work all the time.
And can you see that it isn't working anymore? So I always say too, if you can see it, you can shift it. So when we bring the subconscious belief to light, and we're talking about parts therapy, the part of you that started smoking for a reason, we can talk to that part and we can update that part and let that part know, hey, you're not 13 anymore. You're 45 and smoking is actually really damaging you. Can we bring those two parts into congruence? So it is a really powerful thing. Do you work with smoking cessation very much?
I think just because I'm known as a hypnotist and I've got quite a few episodes like some people will do, it's not the thing I'm known for. I think there are hypnotherapists that really do that. What was interesting to me once is I had a client, and it was the strangest client I ever had. But since we're on a podcast, we might as well share it because it's quite unusual. I got a message saying, "Can you hypnotize me to get lung cancer?"
Oh.
And I'm like, this must be a joke. And I said, "Don't you mean to not get lung cancer?" And he's like, "Nope, I want you to hypnotize me to get lung cancer." And I said, "Hey, let's do a consultation call because this sounds really unusual." We had a consultation, and it was a kink, a fetish of he wanted to die. And the more disgustingly he imagined dying, the more it was a bit of a turn on. And I said, "Look, I will work with you on one condition. And that is that if in the hypnosis session, there is a part that wants to survive, you, before the hypnosis starts, are pre-agreeing with me that I can work with that part." Because I'm thinking like, surely he doesn't actually want to die. There must be a part within that wants to live. So I did this hypnosis session. And I'm being gruesomely graphic because I'm thinking if I can make his stomach churn, he's going to think, no, this isn't. So like coughing up blood, seeing the tumor sprout from within, literally like having to kind of speak through a little kind of tube. And he's getting more and more excited the more graphic and disgusting I am. And at the end of it, I'm like, so is there any kind of shift there? And he's like, "That's amazing." And he said, "If I keep listening to this, do you think I'll get lung cancer?" And it dawned on me, this guy did not want to change. He wanted to have this belief, and he was probably going to go away and smoking more after that. But I put that, protecting the confidentiality of the client, I put it on my podcast. I got so many smoking cessation clients because normally the average smoker disassociates from consequence. They're like, it relaxes me, it's harmless, and all of those things that they see on the side of a packet that are pretty gruesome. Oh, that will happen to someone else. And then they suddenly, and it's hypnosis to get lung cancer, and that's an open loop immediately. It's like, what? Well, like, that's a strange thing, and only a smoker would really even want to pay attention to that. So they did, and then suddenly, I couldn't help that client. Well, I kind of did help him because I'm sure he went off and was smoking more, but in doing so, tens of thousands of other people reached a point of threshold, the inciting motivational change of, oh yeah, that's possible. and it collided consequence with action. And then they're messaging me, it's like, you know, that really disturbed me, that episode. Like, I need some help. And it's like, okay. So couldn't stop that guy from smoking because he didn't want to stop smoking. But for those that do, you know, that it came from that. And I hadn't done much smoking cessation before that, but one client with a fetish led to me helping lots of people actually quit. So all's well that ends well.
Did you ever smoke yourself?
Never, because both of my parents did. And I think that there was some element of me being young, and it was just, they would smoke in the car with the windows up, and they would smoke, and the smell, and it would hurt my nose and my sinuses. And there was an element, I think, of, because I was so vocal about it being young, that at the age when you get 13 or 14 and like kids at the school are like offering, for me, that would have felt so hypocritical because I was so anti kind of smoking. And actually that was a blessing, because if you don't smoke, you never consider weed, you never consider kind of other stuff. And actually, you know, I think I'm fairly healthy for a 48-year-old. A lot of people think I'm younger than I am because I've never smoked, you know, I haven't drunk for 8 years. And generally, I think when you get older, what you look like is a reflection of your decisions, not your genetics. When you're young, it's your genetics. When you're older, it's your decisions. So I'm quite grateful that, weirdly, there was that polarity response of, because if they didn't smoke, I could have had a different polarity response, because there's that teenage desire to rebel. But actually, because they were smokers, and they stopped when my youngest brother, when my mum was pregnant with my youngest brother, my dad continued to smoke secretly. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with lung cancer a few months ago. Unfortunately, it was a year after he quit. But again, the body, you know, you can't undo years of kind of damage to your body. But again, it galvanizes my resolve, because seeing what's happening with my dad, he's just gone through chemo, he's got surgery in a few days' time. It's kind of like, okay, I couldn't help him, but he never really wanted to quit. But if I can help one person out there that does want to quit, and I can get them to a point, then why not channel that emotion into a client that does want to be a non-smoker? Great, you know, then it's positive.
And why did you choose to stop drinking?
It was, I was at 40 years old, and there was two thoughts. One, I would say about 5% of the time I would drink to the point of blackout, and then I would do things under that. And I'm very aware that the unconscious is very capable, but that version of my unconscious, that part was allowed to come to the surface, and it would do reckless things. And again, it was a form of timeline therapy myself. It was kind of like, what happens if I keep drinking this way? And the probability of me either ending up dead or in jail was quite high. So that was one timeline. And then the second thing was this reevaluation of, do I even like this? Do I even want this? And I asked myself a question, and that was, at the age of 40, if I never had alcohol up to this point in my life, would I start now? And the answer was no. And suddenly the combination of seeing a future that I didn't want and the reevaluation of, did I even want it? And that was enough. And you know, people say, oh, it's tough to give up. No, I made a decision. That was it. And I haven't drunk alcohol since. And that was approaching 8 years ago.
Cool. And then did you ever have a weight loss journey?
Not massively. I have the belief system that I can lose weight whenever I want. So my weight loss journey is not extreme, like loose skin and that kind of stuff. But every now and then I make an evaluation. So I was in Portugal in February, and I could just see from my reflection there was a bit too much flab there. And since then, you know, I have a belief system. If I want to lose weight, I can lose weight. And I think I've gained about 5 kilo of muscle and lost about 5 kilo of fat. So I think I'm definitely not fat now. I think I feel quite strong and athletic. And I'll continue to lose more body fat. And I think that's the way, when it's positioned as a struggle of, I want to lose weight, but I can't. And my evaluation is, whenever I want to lose weight, I can. And actually, the goal isn't even to lose weight, it's to lose body fat. Actually, I'm about the same weight as I was in February, but I'm just more muscle. It's the body composition element that I look at. But I could relate to this idea when I was working with a lot of weight loss clients, that it was learned helplessness, which was one of the key things that lead to it. And that's why at the time, bariatric surgery, like the gastric bands, were so appealing. And now it's more Ozempic and Mounjaro and the GLP-1s, is this idea of, I can't do it myself, so I need something else to help. But here's the interesting thing, and that is that before bariatric surgery, before gastric bypass or gastric band, you have to have 2 or 3 days of not eating, only drinking liquids. And here's the interesting thing, to have the surgery, they're doing exactly the thing that would be required to lose weight anyway. They're changing what they eat on a consistent basis. And actually, they don't even need the surgery. All they need to do is to have the belief in their capability that they can lose weight, so it's no longer learned helplessness, and somehow reframing the emotional triggers so it doesn't feel that it's outside of their control. So I wouldn't say I've really ever struggled with weight, but I can really resonate with the idea. I had a very sweet tooth when I was younger. I would have lots of sugar and energy drinks. Look, for me, sugar acts more like a drug than it does a food. And I would say when I work with people with snacking and sugar, I treat it more like how I do with a cocaine user than I do with a weight loss strategy. It's an addiction. I deal with it like an addiction.
Me too. Yeah. And I find that a lot more effective. So when you were going through these, the reason I asked you, and thank you for being so generous with sharing that, is that I know that there's going to be a lot of people listening who have struggled with all of these things. Do you work with a hypnotherapist when you are doing this work, or do you do self-hypnosis?
How I used to do it was through journaling and then kind of decision making and kind of structure. Basically everything I do in a pre-talk. How I do it now, because I have my recording studio, I kind of use a level of disassociation and say, right, if I'm my client, what's all the issues? And then I write all those issues down, and it's like, if I was helping that client, how would I help them? And then I record the session as if it's to myself, and then I listen back to the recording. Because I feel that when I was doing self-hypnosis through inner dialogue, you can only get to a certain level of depth because you need the cognitive influence of your own inner dialogue to control it. Whereas when I listen to my own recordings, I can go deeper. And I did one yesterday based on a guy called David Goggins, which is kind of known for like extreme, like relentlessness and all of those things. And I honestly, I couldn't get to the end because I was so kind of deep in that. And that's just me listening to my own voice. So I much prefer self-hypnosis when I listen to my own recordings than doing it. And knowing so many hypnotherapists, sometimes I'll have guest hypnotists on my show, and at the end they do some hypnosis, and I quite enjoy going into hypnosis. So they're like, okay, like, shall I do it to you? And I'm like, yeah. And I just close my eyes and I get pretty deep pretty quick. And that's one of the benefits of knowing lots of other hypnotherapists, is that, hypnotherapists are quite generous with their time with those kind of things. But generally how I do most of it is I'm kind of hypnotizing myself like I'm my own client. And then that level of separation gives me a level of professionalism, but it also means that I get to be objective. And I think sometimes people aren't that objective. And the clue to that is, if you ask someone, who do you know whose their life is a complete mess? Like, everyone knows someone, bad decisions, bad choices, bad habits. And you say, look, if you did a body swap and you're them for a month and you made changes so that when they come back a month later, like, their life is already on a different trajectory that's positive, do you know what you would do? And they're like, yeah, I'll stop eating that crap and I'll start doing that, and I would do this and I would do that. And it's so obvious when it's someone else. But when it's themselves, somehow it's all, but this and that and my story and the background, and everything is the baggage. And that's why objectivity is such a useful element in therapy. And that's why therapists can help people who can't help themselves, not because they're smarter, it's because they get to see their life with an element of objectivity and disassociation that you can't ever have if you're living your own life. You just can't do it. You're seeing the maze from above rather than being stuck in it.
In Body Talk, we call that the observer effect. There's a lot that we can do on our own, and then there's some things that in order to shift, we need an observer. That doesn't mean someone that's going to fix it for you, but someone to hold that space and observe for you so that you can observe yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Really cool. Oh, Adam, this was so fascinating. I really appreciate you being here. I know that's going to be a really interesting conversation for our listeners. And I have a question for you. If you could talk to 10 years ago you, what advice would you give him, or what do you wish he had known?
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You know those friends who support your preference for podcasts over music on road trips? That's the energy State Farm brings to insurance. With over 19,000 local agents, they help you find the coverage that fits your needs, so you can spend less time worrying about insurance and more time enjoying the ride. Download the State Farm app or go online at statefarm.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
There's the part of me that everyone sees. I'm Howie Mandel, the comedian. Apparently, I know what funny is. Funny bought me a house, but I also know what isn't funny. OCD. I've lived with OCD my entire life, and people throw the term around like it's no big deal. But OCD is severe, often debilitating. It's a mental health condition that involves unrelented, unwanted thoughts that can make you question your character, your beliefs, even your safety. General therapy can help with some things, but for OCD, it can actually make things worse. That's why I want to tell you about NoCD. NoCD is the world's largest treatment provider for OCD and is covered by insurance for over 155 million Americans. Their licensed therapists specialize in ERP, the most effective treatment for OCD. If you think you might be struggling with OCD, go to nocd.com to book a free 15-minute call. They are here to help.
Because I love personal investing, the cheeky part of me says, right, buy lots of Nvidia stock. But on a more pragmatic level, I think I took too long to, I used to think like the marketing element, the lead generation bit is kind of like a little bit kind of icky, and I focused too much on being a good hypnotherapist and not enough on being the kind of person that could impact people. And it's only in the last year or two that I would say I've kind of changed my beliefs about that and came to the conclusion that the more I understand that stuff, then, if you're the most talented person in the world, but nobody knows about you, your impact on the world is negligible. And actually, someone of average competency that is going out there telling them or demonstrating, I think, rather than demonstrating that they are in a position to help other people is going to have way more impact. So I think that would be my advice to myself 10 years ago. And that is, the podcast is 6 years old now. And I think it has 20 million downloads. I think it would be 50 million if I started 4 years older, and not only having the podcast, but doing other things as well. And just, I think the introverted part of me doesn't like to be seen, doesn't like to be heard. But then there's this other part that says, right, what if that's necessary to actually make a difference? And I would kind of speak to that part that wants to make a difference and not to that part that was worried about being judged, which was the essence of me that was kind of a recluse when I was 19 years old. It's kind of like, it's the fear of judgment. People are going to judge, and who gives a fuck is kind of the essence of it.
In order for me to, when I became a hypnotherapist and the business had changed, I've always been an entrepreneur. But when I became a hypnotherapist, I finished being on mat leave with my kids, and I knew I was going to have to build a business again. I love building businesses. It's so much fun. But I was like, I'm going to have to build again. I'm going to have to go on social media. I'm going to have to be on Instagram, and I'm going to have to make videos and all this. And I just did not want to do it. There was a big part of me that was just like, full stop. No, I don't want to do it. But then there was another part of me that's like, well, this is how you build businesses now. So you're going to have to get over it. Yeah. So I had a parts therapy session with my hypnotherapist, and it brought me back to a 3-year-old part of me. And it was a fear of being seen. And when we were able to rework that in regression, I came out of that session, went and sat down and filmed my very first Instagram reel, put it up on social media right after that. And it was able to move forward with it. So I love what you just said about understanding that there are many parts of us, and which part do you want to bring forward? Which part do you want to be in charge? Which part do you want to empower? And hypnosis is so incredibly empowering. That's why I love it so much. That's why I love doing it with my clients. That's why I love having the podcast. Because when we realize that we have so much more control over our life experience than we think, it's a game changer.
I agree. Yeah. And the world is an exciting place when you can tap into even a tiny bit more of what you're capable of. And I think so many people are living a fraction of who they could be. And that's a tragedy. So if through hypnotherapy and all different modalities, we can help people tap into more of who they're meant to be, that's a positive thing. And there's lots of negativity in the world, so it's good to kind of offset that somehow.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that comes down to an abundance mindset of how good do you think things are allowed to get for you. It's one of my favorite things to work with is money ceilings and abundance, because I always say that working with abundance and money ceiling, working with weight loss, those are two doors into our deepest belief systems. We can pretty much do
Totally
anything
agree.
through that
Yeah.
lens, right? So it's one of my favorite things to work with, because like you just said, a lot of us have a belief system from when we were a kid of this is how good it's allowed to get for Robyn. This is how good it's allowed to get for Adam. I can't, have a career that I love and get paid doing what I love and have a partner and have a kid and oh no, that's too much. And that will often come back to belief systems from childhood. So it's a really fun thing to work with too. And everyone is attracted to abundance work. Everybody wants more money. And then we get the safety piece of like, can you hold it once you have it? And that's where hypnosis can be really, really effective.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of my passions is kind of financial freedom, because I grew up in a household where there wasn't a lot. And I think it is one of those things that there's a lot of judgment about your material success, and it's distorted at both ends. Like, if you're going through a tough time and you have a lack, somehow you're fully to blame for everything. Like, luck and misfortune had nothing to input that at all. And if someone's like massively successful, it must be because they're smart and talented and no other reason. It's like, no, there's a lot of nuance in that. And I think one of the things I found very useful is this idea of kind of defining what you actually want. And I figured out when I was that kind of anxious 20-year-old, what I thought I wanted was status, because I had spent a long time not having any, and therefore that feels appealing. And I remember being 20 years old and reading books on goals, and I had this kind of vision board of kind of it was a Lamborghini Gallardo that I wanted. And interestingly, when I had enough money to buy it, I think I was about 20, 25, 26, I remember looking at that and saying, that would be the worst decision I could possibly make, And at that point, I took the same money and started buying investment property, because it dawned on me that actually what I wanted was freedom and not status. And free status is one of those things that actually you're giving your power away. Freedom is just optionality. It gives you the choice without the obligation. That feels better. So when I tell people that I don't need to work, and they're like, well, why'd you do it then? Because I enjoy it, and it feels fulfilling, and it feels stimulating, and it gives me a lot back. But so many people have this mentality that you should only work if it's absolutely obligatory. And then even if you do, you should do the minimum you can get away with. That's the very scarcity mindset that guarantees they're stuck in that place. So I would encourage every single person to be financially free. And by financially free means that you don't have to work for an income. And if you are working, it's because you choose to. Then the world gets a much less stressful place and more possibility.
And what would it feel like to do something that you love so much that you would do it for free, but you get paid for it? And for a lot of people, that's like they can't even conceptualize that. And that's where we would use future pacing, because that's always been my reality. It's one of the things I say, I am so rich in the sense that I have always been paid to do what I love. Love, 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 always, my entire life since I was 12. And so well, when I was 12, actually, that's not true. I will retract that, because when I was 12, I was babysitting and house cleaning and things like that. I did not love that, but I loved being able to make money.
Yeah.
That part I loved. And then I started waitressing when I was 16, and I really did love that, and bartending and meeting people and all that. So it's interesting when you look back and think of all the different things we've done in our life, and I can see how every one of the things that I did was hypnosis. And now I just have like the brain structure to go underneath it, and it's so fun.
Yeah. amazing.
All right. Well, Adam, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything you're going to give me your links that I'll put into the show notes so people can see how they can work with you. I'm going to link to your podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, just I think some of the links that's probably worth sharing are linked to the podcast. If anyone wants to kind of see me on Spotify or see me on YouTube, we'll have links to that. And I've got certain things that are free resources. So I have a free 7-day course called Transform Your Life in 7 Days. There'll be a link to that. And on my podcast, I've also got my 10 favorite episodes. So the problem with having 2,000 published is people are like, well, where do I even start? So there will be a link so that you get to see the 10 that I would recommend. So I'll make sure you have that link as well.
That would be great. I end up just working with the most recent one, but you're right. So you put a podcast out every day?
Daily, yeah.
Daily. Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Well, thank you. It's been such an amazing resource, and I just really appreciate your presence here on this planet. So thank you for all that you do and all that you share. I really, really do appreciate you.
It's been an absolute honor, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Okay. See you at Hypnothoughts.
See you there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of The Hypnotist. If you've enjoyed this episode or got some value from it, please give it a 5-star rating and review. And maybe you know someone that would also benefit from this particular episode, in which case share the episode with them so they can also get the benefit too. And if you would like to listen to this episode where it's just the hypnosis, so no intro, no outro, no explanation, just the hypnosis and completely ad-free, there will be a link in the description where you can subscribe at a very low cost and only get access to the hypnosis. So if that's of interest, please check that out. Thank you again for being a regular listener of The Hypnotist, and I'll see you again soon for more.
The right window treatments change everything. Your sleep, your privacy, the way every room looks and feels. At Blinds.com, we've spent 30 years making it surprisingly simple to get exactly what your home needs. We've covered over 25 million windows and have 50,000 5-star reviews to prove we deliver. Whether you DIY it or want a pro to handle everything from measure to install, we have you covered. Real design professionals, free samples, zero pressure. Right now, get up to 50% off with minimum purchase, plus get a free professional measure at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.
When the going gets tough, get after it with NOS Energy. Keep your foot flat to the floor and never let off. Thunder from top gear to no fear. Never back down, never slow down. Your body is machined with 800 horses coursing through its veins. So go hard, go fast. Go on, grab a can of NOS Energy and get after it.